I'm Tim Owens, the longtime producer of jazz at National Public Radio and creator of NPR's Peabody Award-winning Jazz Profiles, a radio documentary series on the people, places, and things in jazz. The Jazz Profiles shows, nearly 200 of them, are part of the Tim Owens Jazz and Broadcast Collection at the University of North Texas Music Library. In a partnership with the 32 Bar Blues Foundation, we've picked a handful of noteworthy shows to share with you. With my gratitude to the many producers who helped make the series possible, and a special thanks to the series host Nancy Wilson, we hope you'll enjoy this presentation of Jazz Profiles.
When Max Roach sits down at the drums in his neatly pressed suit and tie, he radiates an air of dignity and pride, with good reason. Max is one of the most innovative drummers of our time. He has taken the drums to new heights, helping to fashion a new music called bebop. And in the decades since, his style has become the standard for virtually all jazz drummers. I'm Nancy Wilson. On this edition of Jazz Profiles, a tribute to a key figure in jazz, drummer, bandleader, composer, Max Roach.
He's always been innovative. You know, we use the term genius. It's gotten overworked. I think it's appropriate in this case with Mr. Roach.
Sometimes, I listen to him, all I can do is shake my head. How could a man come up with something like that? What was on his mind? And when I ask him, or his common thing he'll say is, just trying to play the music.
Creativity often comes in times of greatest change. In the early 1940s in New York, a new style of jazz was emerging, bebop, which featured complex harmonies and fast tempos. It was a musical high-wire act led by young virtuosos like Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, and Miles Davis. Sharing the bandstand was Max Roach, who created a framework for the rhythms of bebop. His style soon became an integral part of the modern jazz band. Trumpeter Dizzy Gillespie.
Max was the leading delineator of that music. He was one of the originators of the style, like Charlie Parker was the style in his alto saxophone. And it helped to keep you together. It was what you wanted when you played. He had the lick for this shtick.
Max Roach doesn't just lay down a beat. He makes musical statements each and every time he plays, an outgrowth of astounding technique and a limitless capacity for ideas. Before he came along, the drum solo was usually a flashy, crowd-pleasing break in a song. But Max gave soloing a new meaning, using rhythms, form, and even melody to create solos that were full compositions. Drummer Kenny Washington.
They're like works of art. Like how he's able to come up with these different solos, like one for Sid. What that is actually Sid Catlett's tune called Mop Mop. Billy-do-dat, 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 pop pop.
Max Roach's solo composition for Big Sid, a tribute to drummer Sid Catlett. Max is a complete musician with a wide array of musical interest. He is also a band leader. Over the years, he has directed a remarkable array of groups, ranging from big bands to string quartets, from gospel choirs to percussion ensembles. Max also has collaborated extensively in other arts, dance, theater, and literature.
I enjoy looking for new ideas.
Max Roach.
You know, if I say, okay, I'm going to do something with a percussion ensemble, I'll do something with a string quartet, or string quartet in jazz, or with gospel singers and improvisational musicians. And it makes me feel good to do something I hadn't done. And I believe that you should keep what you have done, that you believe in.
Dan Morgenstern is the director of the Institute of Jazz Studies at Rutgers University.
Well, Max is a quintessential thinking musician, and he's often been a catalyst in making things happen because of his vision and his interest in expanding his own horizons and the horizons of the music. That's what he's done.
Max Roach's pioneering spirit and fascination for rhythm can be traced all the way back to his family home in a part of North Carolina known as Dismal Swamp. It was here that he was born on January 10, 1924, in a community called New Land. New Land was settled by freed slaves following the Civil War. It was a poor town, but proud. By the late 20s, times were getting tough for family farms. Seeking work and a better life, Max's parents took the family north to New York City. New York was an exciting place in the 1930s. The music was everywhere, in theaters and on radio and phonograph records. And you could hear stars like Louis Armstrong, Fletcher Henderson, Duke Ellington, and Jimmy Lunsford. A wide-eyed Max Roach took it all in.
Music was like sports is today. It's like basketball. You know, the people we saw who were role models were the Louis Armstrongs and the Duke Ellingtons and the Jimmy Lunsfords. And we'd go to sit in the theaters on Saturdays all day with our lunch and watch these wonderful musicians.
And as he watched, Max found himself captivated by the surging, pulsating drive of these bands and their rhythmic source, the drummers. Maybe that's why, when his Boy Scout troop began a marching band, Max chose the drums. Before long, he got his own drum kit and practiced at home, hour after hour, emulating the style and technique of his heroes, drummers Papa Joe Jones, Sid Catlett, and Chick Webb. The neighbors complained, but his mother was glad it kept him off the streets and out of trouble.
And then when we got old enough to form bands around the ages of 12 or 13, we could buy music, a complete arrangement for 75 cents. You know, the score and all the parts, they called them stock arrangements in those days. You had a chance to look at the score, compare the parts, and learn a lot of things about just generally what was going on.
By the time he was in high school, Max was playing drums in everything from Coney Island sideshows to after-hours joints uptown. Then one day, while he was playing a gig in Harlem, word came that Duke Ellington's drummer had fallen ill and they needed a last-minute replacement. The club owner recommended Max, and that night he was on stage at the Paramount Theater, playing with the Duke Ellington Orchestra.
That was frightening. It was frightening, you know. The stage gets awfully big when you're sitting in it. And you look around you and you see all these people that you just died to just get into the theater to see. You know, Ben Webster, Johnny Hodges. But then Duke played music from the recordings that I had grown up on. So I was in seventh heaven. I wasn't unfamiliar with it.
Even though he only worked a few days with Ellington, it led to work with some of the best musicians around, like the great saxophonists Coleman Hawkins and Lester Young. Max Roach made his first recordings backing Coleman Hawkins in late 1943 and early 44. He was 19.
From blues to bluegrass, jazz to country, R&B to rock and roll, we're moved by the proud sound of American music. Welcome to 32 Bar Blues, a fresh groove in the men's clothing world, a place where true originality, craft, and style are valued like the art forms we celebrate. Never curated or private labeled, we design and make the majority of our styles in-house. Cool clothes with enough funk or personality to make you smile, but easy to wear for most any venue. And like our name implies, 32 Bar Blues was born with a heart for the arts. Since our first collection in 2012, we featured more than 100 musicians, writers, and photographers on our pages, giving all profits from the sale of their work directly to them. We also promote a handful of nonprofit arts organizations that deserve extra support. To check out the 32 Bar Blues collection and learn more about our commitment to the arts, visit 32barblues.com.
My teachers were folks like Coleman Hawkins and Duke Ellington and Papa Joe Jones and Sidney Catlett. And the classrooms that I grew up in were places like Minton's and Monroe's Uptown House and all the joints in Harlem and Brooklyn and the Bronx that we had a chance to work in and learn and listen. And Lester Young, when I worked with him, that was like, I remember one night he told me, he says, as we finished, and I said, "Good night, Prez." And so he looked up at me and he said, "You can't join the throng till you write your own song." That means that it's okay to play like somebody else, but if you want to make it, you got to think for yourself.
By the early 40s, the winds of change were blowing in jazz. Sensing the change and seriousness of its emerging architects, Max enrolled in the Manhattan School of Music. While attending school, Max met an aspiring young Juilliard student, trumpeter Miles Davis. Both Max and Miles shared a godlike fascination for an alto saxophonist named Charlie Parker, who was doing things with harmony, rhythm, and melody that had never been done before.
We slept and ate music. That was it for us, the two of us. A drummer and a trumpet player. We just wake up in the morning and there was music, music, music. Miles would watch everything Charlie Parker did. He said, "Max, look at the way he sits down." He'd be beating me up, touch me. "Did you see what he just did?" I said, "Miles, if you hit me one more time."
Moving beyond the admiration stage, Max and Miles started playing with Charlie Parker and other like-minded musicians, trumpeter Dizzy Gillespie and pianist Thelonious Monk and Bud Powell. Together, they experimented with their new ideas, using complex harmonies and melodies, often played at furious tempos. Max was a drummer who not only could keep up, but who had an intuitive understanding of what was being played. Amazingly, all of these musicians were still in their early to mid-20s. But whether they knew it or not, the face of American jazz was changing. Bebop was taking shape.
We hated to sleep, and we would work from 9 at night until 9 the next morning in 2 different clubs. We would then spend the days looking for places. We'd go up to Dizzy's house, for example, on 7th Avenue, and spend the rest of the day working out arrangements on things like Around Midnight or Night and Easy or Woody and You.
By the 1940s, the draft and a steep tax on dance halls were taking a toll on the swing-era bands. Many faced financial ruin and dissolved. Small groups became the order of the day, a perfect fit for the economy and for the cramped quarters of the clubs that lined New York's famed 52nd Street. But Harlem was the real incubator for the modern jazz movement, and the musicians would gather uptown after hours, jamming and experimenting to the wee hours of the morning. Trumpeter Dizzy Gillespie, one of the co-leaders of this new music.
We played all the time, daytime, nighttime, and it was very exciting. Everybody was learning something. Everybody was writing. Everybody was, oh man, it was beautiful.
When you work with people like Charlie Parker and Dizzy and Monk and folks like that, it inspires you to think of other things to do. You know, I couldn't play like in that environment the way I would with a big band or things I had grown up on. Now, the bands were smaller, there were 5 people involved, and more was required from all the instrumentalists when they played collectively so you could get a fuller sound.
The more that Max Roach provided was playing in a style that supported improvisation and interaction between members of the band. Before then, drummers kept the beat pegged with steady rhythms on the bass drum and on tightly controlled cymbals called hi-hats. If it sounds complex, it is, with each limb playing something different. But Max made it all sound easy and in time with the band. Drummer Kenny Washington.
Now in the 30s and 40s, most of the basic swing drummers were playing things like this. Max shifted the emphasis from the hi-hat to the ride cymbal. So it was almost like it was like a little bit of a conversation going on between the left hand and the right foot snare drum and the bass drum.
drummer Max Roach with trumpeter Miles Davis and alto saxophonist Charlie Parker on Bird Gets the Worm, recorded in 1947. With his supportive and innovative approach, Max Roach became the drummer of choice for Charlie Parker and many of the other jazz players of the day. Dizzy Gillespie recalls Max's evolution into the first drummer in jazz.
He had terrific ideas in the beginning, and he developed them as he went along. Everybody wanted to play with him, and all the guys, younger guys, were copying him. He had the lick for this shtick.
An early example of Max's new approach to drumming can be heard in this 1945 variation of Ray Noble's Cherokee. Listen to the way Max plays with the time in his drum solo, and the way he drops so-called bombs for accentuation. Featured are Max with Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, also playing piano, and bassist Curly Russell. Here is Coco. Charlie Parker with Max Roach, performing Coco. I'm Nancy Wilson, and you're listening to a tribute to drummer, composer, and bandleader Max Roach on NPR's Jazz Profiles.
Born from the 32 Bar Blues clothing brand, the nonprofit 32 Bar Blues Foundation was established in 2020 to promote American music, literature, photography, and the artists that create within these genres. Jazz, blues, and roots music are of particular focus, all uniquely American art forms that should be nurtured and advanced for the benefit of future generations. Toward these goals, 32 Bar Blues Foundation seeks out and partners with nonprofit arts organizations that provide education, training, opportunity, support, and exposure. Young and emerging artists, as well as established and lesser-known greats, are of equal focus. Through direct 32 Bar Blues corporate support and donations, customer donations, and all profits received from special clothing items and other partner products in the 32 Bar Blues collection, seasonal contributions go directly to the artists and organizations noted in the Arts section of the 32 Bar Blues website. To date, 32 Bar Blues Foundation has contributed more than $200,000 to its nonprofit partners and provided millions of full-page impressions in the 32 Bar Blues catalog. For more information about 32 Bar Blues and its foundation, visit 32barblues.com and click The Arts or go to 32barbluesfoundation.org.
By the early 50s, Max had established a solid reputation in New York jazz circles as a leading sideman, but he felt he couldn't really fully develop as a musician unless he had control over his own group. He decided to start his own band.
When I was working with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and folks like that, I was playing their music, which I enjoyed and learned a great deal from. But then when I began to start my own groups, then I was forced to deal with things as I could conceive of what it would sound like and how I could best project my own musical personality. So that didn't really begin to service as far as a composer and even as a player was concerned until I did begin to start my own groups and making records under my own name.
Looking for a lead instrumentalist, Roach tapped an up-and-coming trumpeter named Clifford Brown. Brown was 23, and he already had a reputation as one of the best new trumpet players around. From the beginning, it seemed the two musicians were ideally suited to each other's musical sensibilities.
We worked, say, 365 days a year. We were together constantly. And all of us are very, very serious about the quality of what we were doing. And we had all, I thought, had reached a kind of maturity that was unique for people that young because we were working constantly in these small clubs and so forth.
Even on their first records, the Max Roach Clifford Brown Quintet sounds tight and well-rehearsed. But there's also a lot of spontaneity at play, as you can hear in this version of a Brown tune called Daoud. From 1954, the Max Roach Clifford Brown Quintet with Daoud. Dizzy Gillespie was a strong influence on Clifford Brown. Then he became a close friend and admirer.
It was bebop, the style that was created by Charlie Parker. Everybody got into that. But as it went along, the style changed to the way that Clifford Brown played. He used to attack every note. And all the trumpet players are playing like that now.
While playing with Clifford Brown, Max Roach continued to grow and refine his drumming. Kenny Washington.
He was very in tune with not just rhythms and drum solos, but music, how to complement not only the soloists, but the compositions themselves. Like, for example, there's a Thad Jones arrangement of I Get a Kick Out of You. The way he plays in the ensembles, the way he fits in with what everybody else is doing, the different rhythms, playing these accents. All these different accents. So in order to do that, you have to know the music. You have to be able to sing these pieces. You have to be able to get inside the horn player's mind.
I Get a Kick Out of You, performed by the Max Roach Clifford Brown Quintet. In 1956, Clifford Brown and pianist Richie Powell were on an all-night drive through Pennsylvania, heading for a gig in Chicago. But something happened on the road. Their car flipped over, killing Brown, Powell, and Powell's wife, Nancy. Clifford Brown was only 25. The flame of a promising career had been extinguished. But even in a few short years, he established a legacy which still stands today. The accident left Max Roach devastated.
It was a shock. It was just shocking, and I guess I was in a state of shock and not knowing it for several years after that.
The following years were marked by new achievements for Max Roach, including an exceptional band with trumpeter Booker Little. The group was one of his first without a piano, a format he prefers even to this day. From 1958, here is an example of that group playing You Stepped Out of a Dream. Even though he was on a brilliant and innovative path musically, Max was plagued by personal problems. One of his biggest was with alcohol addiction. But even in the face of struggle, he was determined to move forward. He set out on a new creative direction. That's just ahead. I'm Nancy Wilson, and you're listening to Jazz Profiles, a profile of the master percussionist, band leader, and composer Max Roach from NPR, National Public Radio. By the mid-50s, Max Roach had become the drummer's drummer and a successful band leader on the cutting edge of jazz. He was also honing his skills as a composer. But the death in 1956 of his partner Clifford Brown was a turning point for Max. He felt that a chapter in his life had closed for good. Then, like many other musicians during the late 50s and early 60s, he became caught up in the civil rights movement, personally and musically.
The country had changed. We thought the country was going to change and things were going to be better in education and labor and equality and all this. It was like that dream that everybody was hoping would happen. And I felt if I had an opportunity to say something about what I thought I should talk about, whether it was through my music or whatever, I was going to do it because I have a stake in this country as well as anybody else.
But the mammy ain't his wife. Chopping cotton, don't be slow. Better finish out your road. Keep a moving with that plow. Driver man'll show ya how. Get to work and root that stump. Driver man'll make you jump. Better make your hammer ring. Driver man'll start to swing. Ain't but two things on my mind. Driver man and quitting time.
Max Roach's 1960 composition Freedom Now Suite remains one of the most powerful pieces of music from the civil rights years. The Freedom Now Suite, co-written with poet Oscar Brown Jr. and featuring singer Abbey Lincoln, whom he later married, was a multimedia piece evoking the hardships of slavery and oppression, the shock and excitement of emancipation, and hopes for fuller freedoms. It was performed in a number of cities in this country and as far away as Tokyo. From the Freedom Now Suite, featuring vocalist Abbey Lincoln, the composition Freedom Day.
Whisper, listen, whisper, say we're free. Rumors flying, must be lying, can it really be? Can't conceive it, can't believe it, but that's what they say. Slave no longer, this is Freedom Day. Freedom Day, it's Freedom Day. Throw those shackling chains away. Everybody that I see says it's really true, we're free.
Freedom Day from Max Roach's Freedom Now suite. Even as he began to compose for larger ensembles, Max continued to develop his solo compositions for the drums. But when it came time to play these solos in concert, the promoters and even some of his fellow musicians were skittish.
They'd say, well, you're just doing a solo with drums. And I say, yes, that's what it is. You mean to tell me you're going to play an hour and a half with drums? Yes. So it meant that I had taken years now to work out different compositions, knowing what not to do and what to do, and I'm still working at this and creating etudes, so to speak, or pieces.
Dan Morgenstern, director of the Institute of Jazz Studies at Rutgers University.
They're lovely little pieces. I mean, they're like compositions for the jazz drum set. It's almost like percussion chamber music, and it's very special.
Here's one of Max's finest solo compositions, a piece he calls Reflections. Max Roach with Reflections, recorded in 1979. In the early 70s, with an eye to passing on his knowledge to a new generation, Max took a teaching position at the University of Massachusetts. While there, he was able to expand his musical explorations.
I began then to experiment with the choruses and orchestra because you had students, you had a 60-voice choir to deal with. You had musicians in the music department, and you could hear things that you were doing, and other people up there we began to collaborate on doing large orchestral works that spotlighted percussion and improvised instrumentalists.
In 1970, Max Roach began one of his longest-lived and most ambitious projects, a percussion ensemble called Boom.
I could envision the sound of a group of quote-unquote jazz percussionists that would create something different, but would still be in the continuum of what Duke Ellington and Count Basie or whatever visualized, but only with percussion instruments. From bass marimbas down to timpani and on up to bells and crotales. We could just do anything we wanted. And Not ever to sound like, say, Duke Ellington or Count Basie or anything like that, but come up with our own musical personality. And that was the goal of M-Boom, and still is the goal.
The late Freddie Waits was a founding member of M-Boom. In this 1989 interview, he recalled one of the group's initial experiments.
One piece, for instance, was Omar Clay's piece, which is Onomatopoeia. We had a timpani that was the lead piece, and then and later into the chimes and the gongs, and it transformed. The colors changed so much in the piece that everybody was very excited about this whole thing, and plus he had a very unique rhythm in the piece.
Since the early 70s, Max Roach has also led a pianoless jazz quartet with longtime band members Odine Pope on saxophone, Cecil Bridgewater on trumpet, and Calvin Hill on bass. Max also works with another quartet led by his daughter Maxine, the Uptown String Quartet. When these groups perform together, they form the Max Roach Double Quartet. The Max Roach Double Quartet with Max's composition, A Little Booker. Since the 80s, Max has become widely involved with composing music for the theater. In 1985, He won an Obie Award for music he created for plays by Sam Shepard. Recently, he's accompanied dance performances by Bill T. Jones and the Donald Byrd Company. But of all the projects Max has underway, one that he considers most important isn't musical at all. For 10 years now, he's been working on an autobiography, co-authored with poet Amira Baraka. Max Roach.
It's a certain satisfaction from knowing that you can go travel the world and people look at you as if you've done something with your life. And that's important, and to let people know that you came from the bottom and there you are, still alive and still doing things and trying to do things. And to show how it happened is important to me. And it may reach down to some kid who might just read it or something like that and say, yeah, because it can happen. You can beat anything.
Max has risen from dismal swamp and the poverty of the inner city to co-create one of the most revolutionary and influential styles in music. And he's given new meaning and respect for the drums. Above all, his quest for innovation remains unrelenting. Wherever Max Roach goes in this world, he is increasingly recognized for his contributions to the artistic community.
I think people are really starting to realize everything that this man has done. It's finally hitting people. So it's a lot of different things. It's of course, all the music of Charlie Parker's and his own groups, plus things that he's done with dancers in the theater, poets, all these different aspects of music and entertainment. And people, for a change, have finally realized this is a master here.
Throughout his life, Max Roach has remained devoted to music in the continuity of Charlie Parker and Duke Ellington. He hasn't overthrown the great achievements of the past. He has revitalized them. Max Roach is, and will continue to be, a rich source of ideas and inspiration for generations of drummers all over the world. Our portrait of Max Roach was written and produced by Ben Shapiro. Jazz Profiles is produced by Tim Owens. Our senior editor is Robert Rand. Assistant producer, Madeline Smith.